Page 230, no, 231. Chapter titled Eponymous. The singing tree. I didn't double check that in the dictionary. I think eponymous means as of the same name. Nice picture. Chapter 11. Time goes by so fast, Mother sighed one evening in April 1918, that the apple tree is showing white. Time to thin out my tomato seedlings in the boxes. Time. There are so many ways to count the time now, Kate said in a puzzled voice. Remember, Auntie, when I came to you 6 years ago, we used to say the same thing. Time for the tomato seedlings. The apple tree is showing white. Later, it was time to plant the flower garden. Because old Mother Stork was sitting on her eggs. Time for the gypsies was to dig potatoes in the fall, and when the first snow came, it was to bring out the spinning wheel and the loom for winter evenings. Now I count the time by Daddy's letters. Grigory counts them by sleeps. So do the little children. Hans counts them from the day he heard about his father. Uncle Martin, you count them by what the newspapers say about the war. Mari, by little Penny's age and teeth. Jancy by the foals. Grandpa waits for the time when they can go back. And Lily, all of us in different ways. All except you, Auntie. I'm all mixed up now. She looked around a little ashamed of this long and slightly incoherent speech. There had been something in her mind she wanted to put into words, but with the words coming so slowly, the idea had flown. Uncle Martin was looking at her intently with a very small but warm smile. They were sitting around the kitchen table, Father, Mother, Grandpa, Jancy, Lily, and her mother, Mari, and Kate. The Russians were out in the yard singing softly to the achy little tune Grigory was playing on his balalaika, I believe. The 6 German children had gone to bed, some with toys, some with forbidden but overlooked kittens, new kittens all spoken for, and Hans with an ache in his heart that even a kitten could not purr away. I don't think you're mixed up, Kate, said Father, still with the warm smile on his face. I think you know what you were thinking, and it's about time someone put it into words. Let me tell you a story. It will be a war story again. It begins with guns booming and shells screaming, but it will end with the words you were thinking. This story began one day in August 1915. We had been advancing all night, all through the long, silent night that followed a day of the heaviest shell fire from both lines, the Russians and ours. Each had been trying to advance. Finally, the Russians left their trenches and retreated. After sundown, we were ordered to follow their retreat. We marched, or rather crept, or crawled and stumbled across this no man's land of shell holes, barbed wire, and burned down forests and ruined houses and deserted Russian gun nests. Except for us, there was nothing alive anywhere. No rabbits scurrying underfoot, no squirrels jumping from tree to tree, no birds, not even an owl hooting for miles around. Just odds and ends of broken things the war leaves behind. All night we crept and crawled and stumbled, and still there was only dark night and silence to greet us. Even gunfire would have been welcomed in that night, anything to break the spell of having come into a land where only we creeping men were alive. And then, when men's teeth began to chatter with fear, far more benumbing than fear of injury or death, a finger of light, a tiny, weak herald of the approaching dawn, shivered over the edge of darkness, grew less weak, then stronger, changed from gray-green into the palest of yellow streaks across the horizon, turned into gold and then orange, and at last we could see again. Dawn's a creepin'. Dawn, a creeping man said, as if he had never hoped to see dawn again. Ahead of us and behind us lay a devastated forest with only skeletons of trees still standing here and there. Underfoot, there was the same litter of broken things we had come to know by touch, if not by sight. Barbed wire, broken guns, empty cartridges, empty tins, all around us was the same silence that had roared in our ears all night. And then, as the sun broke through the clouds at last, we saw one tree, one single apple tree that must have been near a house. Only the house was no longer there. "It's alive," a creeping man said, but with the words he rose. "Alive," another man said, as if he never hoped to see a green tree again. "It sings," someone whispered. "It's alive, I can hear it." Now men rose to their feet and walked and ran like men toward the singing tree, which was alive with birds, living birds, singing to the dawn in a live apple tree. Birds, little wrens and sparrows and late robins and warblers, thrushes and orioles. The green tree was alive with birds all singing to the dawn. Against the trunk, owls huddled sleepily. There were jackdaws, and even a crow or two had taken shelter there, friends and foes of the bird world, side by side, all from different nests that perhaps would never shelter them again. For nests must have fallen with the trees that held them, and here they were, small, feathered orphans of a man-made storm, huddled together on a green apple tree, singing to the dawn. Perhaps they were too merely passing time until it would be safe to travel forth and build anew or seek the old nests. Just passing time, but while they waited, each was singing a song to dawn, each in a different way. The one live thing that would never go away unless a man-made gun should uproot it from the earth and it grew in was the apple tree. It did not wait for time to pass. It did not try to sing. It just was, and God had made it. It just was what God had made it. A simple, homey tree. Small orphans, large ones, for a while, found shelter on its sturdy limbs. They would pass on. Father was looking at Mother now and laid his hand on hers, folded on the table. They would pass on. New ones might come. There might be storms again, but she, mother of all, she would remain the same. He said the last words in a husky voice, looking into Mother's eyes. The cuckoo clock on the shelf sounded very loud. It had the whole kitchen to itself and made the best of it while human beings kept their silence. Then there was a long, tremulous sigh from Kate that sounded as if she had been holding her breath for too long. Grandpa immediately cleared his throat, as only men can, who are very young and soft inside. You might want to cover it up with a big noise. Rumph! You might as well tell me, Martin, am I the blinking owl or the crow? To the little awakening smiles that followed his question, Grandma added a chuckle, turning my daughter's head. That's what the man is doing. Never saw the like of him for flowery language. Humph. What's a woman for, if not to take care of those who need her? Isn't she big enough? Next thing you know, I'll have to put a gusset into that bodice of hers. It's fair bursting now. They were all laughing now. Lily's mother leaned forward a moment later and touched Father's sleeve. Martin, that finger of light heralding the dawn. Might the Russian Revolution be that first pale light of hope? I think so, Father said seriously. At any rate, this much is certain. There is no more organized Russian army fighting against us or the Germans. It might mean that war will be over? Asked Jancy. Soon? Daddy would come home then. Oh, Uncle Martin. And our daddy, Lily's mother, smiled at her daughter, and Peter. And she patted Mari's hands. All their eyes were turned now to the shivering, pale, small finger of light, the light of new hope. It might bring on the dawn. Everywhere, eyes of men, women, and children were turning toward the same light of hope. The prayer for peace in people's hearts lent it a radiance it never really had. For the collapse of Russia, while it was the beginning of the end of the war, also unleashed another menace on mankind, class hatred. But the war was still spinning its mad whirlwind in the West. France, England, Germany, Italy were writhing in the terrific struggles of 1918, and millions of Americans were thrown into it. Austrian and Hungarian troops were pouring from north to south to the Italian front. Tired troops, bedraggled troops, rebellious troops, veterans of 4 years who have reached the end of the ragged edge of human endurance, young boys who, when the war began, had been children of 15, 16, tired old men, and bewildered youngsters, all of them, desperately wanting one thing, only to go home. Go home. Go home. Who cared now about victory? What was victory? Which of the exhausted nations could ever feel victorious? Who would dare to parade with brass bands and flags flying over millions of graves? Medals were showered on these men all over Europe, medals from staggering governments in one last effort to keep their armies together. Ha ha! Laughed the men all over Europe. So they are giving us little shiny toys to play with. Maybe they think that little shiny toys will make us forget that we are hungry and ragged and afraid of ghostly eyes staring at us in our dreams and ghostly lips asking, why? Why did you kill me, brother? And so the end came, the end of war, the end of the Habsburg Empire, the end of the German Empire. Nobody cared. It was the end of war. And with the end of war came a voice from across the ocean, the voice of an American president in the dreadful hush that lay over Europe after the guns had ceased to roar. This voice sounded like a clarion call, proclaiming a new, happier day, impartial justice to all, in the common interest of all the nations. These words had reached a small Hungarian village late in the fall of 1918, together with the first ragged, tired men returning home. Together with the news of that exchange of prisoners between the nations had begun. Father and Jancy drove into the village that day for the news. When they entered the store, Uncle Moses came to meet them with outstretched hands. "Oh, Martin, Martin," he almost sobbed the words. "Read this paper. Read what the American president had said. Read, Martin, and rejoice." They read, and when they finished the long article, so full of the high ideals of a man who wanted only justice, equality, peace, everlasting peace for all men, because all men were created equal, the big farmer and the small storekeeper looked at each other with shining eyes. Uncle Moses pointed with trembling fingers to the paper. "This, Martin, this makes me sure now, for the first time sure, that Joseph and Sam have not died in vain. A new day is coming, Martin, for us, for all nations. No more wars, Martin, no more persecution, no more intolerance, ever." He was trembling, very pale. Father rose and put his arms around him gently, as if he were holding a child. "No more, Uncle Moses. I am just as happy as you are, but you look very tired. You haven't had a rest in years and years. Neither has Aunt Sarah. Come out with us to the farm for a few days. The store will get along without you." Uncle Moses shook his head. "No, thank you, dear friend. Aaron might be home any day, and we want to be home to welcome our lawyer son, only..." He smiled. "Aaron won't be a big lawyer now, as we planned, no." You know what he wants to be? What, Uncle Moses? The fourth Mandelbaum, keeping a store in the village. A smart man, like Aaron, a storekeeper. Uncle Moses shook his head ruefully, but his eyes were dancing. "I'll have a hard time teaching him how to swap silver buttons for a cow, or a cow for wool, or wool for harness with some glasses of wine and a whip thrown in." Jancy laughed. "No," chuckled Uncle Moses, "that'll come easy, but it will take time to teach him when to forget what people owe him. Nobody can learn that out of books." Father held out his hand. "I'm glad, Uncle Moses, very glad. Jancy will learn to be a real farmer now," he laughed at Jancy's indignant he laughed at Jancy's indignant frown. "A real farmer who milks his own cows, instead of letting a mere girl do it for him. Aaron will learn to be the kind of shopkeeper we always had here. And between the big farms and the small store, people will live again and work again and sing again." On the way home, when they reached the lane, Jancy touched Father's arm. "Could we stop for a moment, Father? I would like to see if it's still there." He pointed toward the tree where 4 years ago he had seen the ancient post of 1848. The monument. Father stopped the horses without a word. Then, as they were walking to the tree, he smiled at Jancy. "If it isn't, son, you and I will carve a new one for the next generations to see." But it was there. 4 years of storms. Page 243. Could not mar the deeply carved words that had withstood the storms of half a century. Liberty, equality, fraternity, and underneath the list of names, beginning with Martin Nagy, the large landowner, and ending with Moses Mandelbaum, the small Jewish merchant. Liberty, equality, fraternity. Father read the words slowly. Soon they will ring again all over the world, these beautiful words. Only a fourth one, just born, will ring clearer. Peace. He looked up into the November sky. Please, God, just peace. In silence, they walked to the wagon again, driving between the old trees that had led him home so often. Jancy sighed. Lily's mother said, once these trees seemed to whisper, "Come, we'll lead you home." Kate came home this way. Lily, Mari, Baby Panny, the Russians, the 6 sniffling Germans. Now it'll be strange to see most of them go the other way. The house will be too large for us. The trees will lead Uncle Sandor home soon, said Father, and smiled down on Jancy. And unless I miss my guess, he won't come home alone. Jancy was taken aback for a moment, and then he grinned. Sonia? Uh-huh. What do you think, son? Another woman, that's what I think. Well, son, you and I will stick together. That's enough, isn't it? Jancy sighed, a big, deep, big sigh from deep down in his heart. Yes, that's enough. They drove on, lost in thought for a while, and then, when the White House gleamed up between the trees, Jancy spoke. You know what, Father? What, son? The story about the singing tree, remember? Uh-huh. Well, I know what you meant about Mother and how she's always the same, and I like the way you said the story was for her. And I like the way you said the story for her. They probably meant to say was for her. Well, I know what you meant about Mother and how she is always the same, and I like the way you said the story for her. Is for her or was for her? Probably missing, but it's still close enough. Or maybe that's how they spoke back then. Sorry. I haven't given much of my, what's it called? I haven't given much of my commentary during the book. So clip it if you don't want to see it again. Thanks for watching me read. But to me, the singing tree was more than ever, Mother, to me. Yes. But to me, the singing tree was more than even Mother to me. Yes? To me, the stillness and the ruins in the story was the time when you weren't here. And the tree, it's the house. And you and Mother. It's everything we are, sort of together. Oh, you know what I mean. Father had his hand around Jancy's shoulder and spoke in a low, happy voice. Small orphans, big ones, for a while found shelter. They would pass on, Jancy said slowly. New ones might come. There might be storms again. But, Father waited for Jancy to finish. But we, the house, and us, we would remain the same. I think that's it, folks. Beautiful artwork. The singing tree. I've seen some of these online, decent quality with most of the cover, but not personalized to my mother, whom I love. To Marianne with love from the Hinnemans or Minnemans, June 8th, 1958. I don't know why they would date it June 8th, 1958, because my mother's birthday was February 12th, is February 12th. She'll be 75. February 12th, 2022. Coming up. Maybe we'll stop the video and y'all have a good night. God bless you. Thanks for, I'm going to read more books, and if you like them, you like them. Come on, sit with me. And maybe I'll have more or less commentary at the beginning. I'll put notes in the chat or the topic to let you know if you need to skip around, or y'all can do it. You know, as you're watching. He goes on and on. Just time about that thing. So.